virtual meeting of Newcastle's full council. That's all members who are joining us today and everyone watching at home on YouTube. It looks as if we'll be needing to meet in this way in the immediate future. So hopefully we're all more used to it now than we were. So do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've had an apology from Councillor Rahman, but he is intending to join the meeting later.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I believe he's on.
Lord Mayor,
yes.
Sorry, could I add some more apologies from Councillor Karen Robinson, Councillor Matt Folker, and also Councillor Avery and Councillor Morrissey will be joining us later.
Thank you for that.
Lord Mayor.
Yeah.
Can I give apologies for Councillor Brian Hunter? Yeah, he couldn't get on board.
Okay. Thank you for those. In spite of that, ironically, these virtual meetings are better attended than we ever have been. But here we go. Does Council agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of September 2020?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. If you don't, just put something in the chat now. I'm hearing that's agreed. Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Right. If I can move on to announcements, I've agreed a request from the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Nick Cott, to ask an urgent oral question, and this will be answered under item 7 on the agenda this evening when we get there. I've also agreed a request from Councillor Nick Kemp for an emergency notice of motion, which has been circulated in the items circulated at the meeting pack. The reason for urgency given relates to the need to address the current potentially catastrophic position of the hospitality sector and the impact this could have on the city as a whole as a result of the local lockdown restrictions. And this motion will be taken immediately before item 10 on the agenda. We've also been notified that item 11 on the agenda on trees has been withdrawn from this meeting. So if I can move on, there are no petitions received this month. Equally, there have been no requests to address council received for this month. So without more ado, we can move on to item 6, which is the overview and scrutiny annual report. And I'll call on Councillor Lower to move the report, which is to be seconded by Councillor Copley. Councillor Lower.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, I think that I've take great pleasure to introduce the annual report of overview and scrutiny to council. I think at present time, because we're unable to meet in person because of COVID, we've been very innovative in finding new ways of working, and I think that is due not in any small form to the staff and the help that they've given us with the IT process to get this going. I think the biggest change we've had, of course, is to be virtual meetings and the live streaming, which, as you say, we get more attention and it works great. But the thing about scrutiny, it's vital to ensure that local democracy is still accountable and continues. And we do have a forward plan that we work to, and it's linked to the Cabinet forward plan, and we feel that it works well that way. However, at the minute, we're aware that we need to be flexible, and in order to make a meaningful contribution to what's going on, because the situation changes so frequently, we will keep to our normal schedule. I don't want to go through all the things we've done and all the things we plan to do, but I do think that we need to look at other priorities as well as our existing ones. We need to look at something around what City Futures means and what it's doing and what we do, how we're bringing things together, and other decision-making committees that are on the schedule for the council. But I'm quite happy to take questions on this. And before I do, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's attended scrutiny, whether they're officers, members of the committee, other councillors and the Cabinet. I think we've had huge support from the staff, and I think we appreciate the work that Councillor Holland did when she was Vice Chair, and we welcome Councillor Copley as our new Vice Chair, and hopefully we'll have another fruitful and positive year to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lower. Councillor Copley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you. I echo the words of Councillor Lower. I joined Overview and Scrutiny last year as a new councillor, and I've learned so much from everybody involved in that process. Other councillors and officers, everybody works incredibly hard to make sure that we have a transparent process and that decision making local democracy benefits from the scrutiny levelled at that. The committee helps us to look at issues and concerns through special task and finish groups, and they have a vital role to play, I feel, making sure that everyone's voice is heard in issues that affect them. And scrutiny holds us all accountable for all financial matters, quality, and the standards of service provided by the council. And I think it's a very, very interesting process in terms of how decisions are made and the level of expertise that is available to us as a group from our strategic leads and officers too. So it's one area of the council where all parties work together in the interests of the city. And I think that's something to be recognised and celebrated. So I'd just like to thank everyone involved in that process, along with Councillor Lower, and offer a personal thanks to her for her support as a new Vice Chair, and also to Councillor Holland for the support that she's given to me too. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Taylor. To be
thank you, Lord.
Councillor Schofield.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can I firstly...
Can somebody mute the microphone that's causing that, please?
Right.
Councillor Taylor, would you like to try again?
Right. So can I firstly thank all the officers that are involved in health scrutiny and all our partners that come along to give us the information we want to look at, and are really very helpful in taking part in scrutiny, including Health Watch and the voluntary sector, as well as the hospitals, the universities, etc. I have to say that being chair of health scrutiny at the moment reminds me of the Chinese proverb, "May you live in interesting times," which actually is a curse. And it's certainly, have to say, it's very interesting to be involved in health scrutiny at the moment. The report is just up to May 2020, which I have to say seems a lifetime ago. But we did cover a range of very important topics. In particular, we were concentrating on mental health, on integration of health and social care, on GP services in the city, and on services for dementia. But obviously, in the last few months, we've been concentrating mainly on the impact of COVID-19. We had a report at our March meeting. We then obviously had to go offline for a while, but we have been meeting since July every month, and we've had a monthly update. I think going forward that will continue to be the main topic, but we do have to make sure that we cover all the other important issues that health scrutiny has to look at, such as safeguarding and the annual reports from the hospitals and the ambulance trust. So thank you again for everybody involved, and I look forward to another interesting year.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Schofield, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I again would like to echo all that's been said about the incredible service we get from officers, but also everybody who's given presentations to overview and scrutiny, but also to health scrutiny, as Councillor Taylor says. I mean, I'm particularly interested in what Councillor Lower said about how it provides a platform for accountability, which residents can rely on, and I think that's extremely important. So I was just interested if Councillor Lower had anything to say, really, or Councillor Cotley, on how we can really strengthen and expand the role of the overview and scrutiny, which it's such a big agenda, and sometimes it feels an overwhelming agenda. So I was just interested how they think we can really focus and make the very best of this tool for accountability, which is so important to democracy. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, your hand's raised. Do you?
No.
Councillor Lovatt, do you want to take that
Yeah,
now or come back to the end?
I'll come back on that one very quickly. Thanks for that, Anne. Yeah, we had started holding meetings externally in different places in the community, inviting people along to talk about specialised topics. Obviously, COVID has made a huge difference to that. But I would hope that we will, somewhere in the very near future, be able to hold more evidence gathering sessions on special subjects, task and finish groups. But as I say, we're confined to the fact that we can't meet physically. However, I do think that scrutiny has a huge role to play. And although it is a big remit, we did split it, so we do have the health and the finances separately. So we do all have time to look at things. I think that overall, we do a pretty good job of covering most of the subjects and topics that we need to. And we're always open to anyone on the council, not just members of the committee, putting things forward that we can follow up and maybe take on board and put on our agenda. So it's really up to the members to come to us and let us know what they want.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to give a further update on the work of the Finance and Budget Subcommittee. It was obviously really welcome development over the summer that we were able to get back to meeting again virtually. I think that's been really useful for us to continue the vital work of scrutiny within the council. The budget position we find ourselves in now has been quite challenging, and I think it testament to the work of officers that they've actually managed to plug the gap, as it were, through the use of funds that were available from previous years and through some other mechanisms. And it's very valuable considering the significant financial pressure that the council is under at the moment, given the pandemic. Obviously, these things do take away from areas that the council could have spent money on otherwise, but it is nonetheless very welcome that they're able to do that. Obviously, the main focus of the subcommittee is on the budget process, and so for the next budget process, we're looking to carry on the work as usual, supporting the finding of a balanced way forward, whilst also scrutinising the different priorities that are placed in front of us for how the council wants to spend its money. Additionally, we've also taken on the job of setting up a task and finish group to look at how we do public consultation on the budget process each year, and that will be going on during the budget process this time round. I think it's worth noting that we do have significant future challenges that are either structural or heightened by COVID-19, such as loss of retail income, loss of rental income for the commercial property in particular, and various other challenges that the council will have to adapt to. And as always, the members of the committee want to be as supportive and open to suggestions from the council, whilst sort of providing that critical friend role at the same time. In doing so, we appreciate the time that officers do spend coming to speak to us. It's more difficult at the moment because of the challenges that the officers are under, and the significant challenges to their time, given the priorities they're having to handle with the pandemic. But it's good that the scrutineering is still put in a high regard, and officer time is spent on it. And as regards to the other functions of the committee, we have taken on the role of looking at how the budget changes, how the savings are handled throughout the year, and I think that is working really well. And that ability to challenge or to question those priorities and decisions is made possible by the work of some very dedicated officers. Janet, Mark and Kirsty in particular, they have been really excellent, but all officers have come to the committee and spoken openly and honestly with us, which is very much appreciated. So thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to say that on the Finance Subcommittee.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I just want to welcome the report, echo many of the earlier comments that have been made. Thank Karen and her staff from Democratic Services for the excellent service and support they give to this committee. I've been involved in many committees over my years on the council, but this has been absolutely excellent, the way that they provide information and support the committee in so many ways. I've actually been around the council long enough to remember when scrutiny was introduced, and prior to that we used to have service committees, and it's been quite a steep learning curve. And I think in the early years we did struggle to grapple with how scrutiny would differ from the previous committees. But I'm so impressed now with the way that we've taken it on board. I think that scrutiny now is so much more effective. I think the level of discussion there reflects the way that people have acquired those skills and the quality of the people who are on that committee. And it may well be that as we get new people joining the committee in the future, we can use those skills for some kind of a training event. This is perhaps a comment and a question for the chair, some kind of a training event, because scrutiny and examining all aspects of the council we realise is so important, and therefore it needs to be done effectively, and the skills we've built up can be very important in trying to do that. So without wishing to repeat many of the things people have said before, and I think the report reflects the breadth of the work that we've done. It's been absolutely tremendous, looking at the environment, looking at climate change and so many other things, and the way we've been so adaptable in terms of COVID-19 and the challenges that we now face, I think is very impressive. So I welcome the report, Chair and Lord Mayor rather, and I look forward to another very successful year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In these difficult times with restrictions on in-person meetings and indeed nearly all face-to-face interactions, the work of scrutiny is more important than ever. So I'd like to add my thanks to all of those who make it possible as a process and who have contributed to reports. There are two topics in the Finance and Budget Monitoring Report on which I welcome an update, if that's possible, please. The vacancy rate for commercial properties across all sectors, given the impact of the pandemic, which is already or will lay waste to some and possibly quite a lot of businesses, what risks are there to the assumptions about income from business rates? And secondly, the potential impact on the budget of Brexit and the ongoing uncertainty around the local government settlement. Presumably, this doesn't get a lot of bandwidth at the moment, and in the past, the process for the city setting a budget has been made more difficult by short notice of the settlement. Both of these things, together with extra unfunded costs of meeting virus issues, presumably also mean there's a large element of risk and doubt about devising a balanced and timely budget for the city.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Lower, do you want to take up any of those points?
Yes, please, just quickly. I just want to say thanks to Councillor Higgins. I have to say, Councillor Higgins, the committee's only as good as the members, and I must admit we do have a really good bunch on there. We do normally have an annual meeting where we invite everyone, including directors and members and any member of the council, to come along and thrash out ideas and discuss what we should be doing and what people see as important. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that this year with the circumstances, but it is something we do, and as I say, we will take anything that people want to bring to us and raise. We will look at it and see if it's feasible to do it. Councillor Ashby, I mean, a lot of your questions are technical ones, maybe for the officers. They're not really in the report for me to answer. The subcommittee meets to discuss these things, but I really think that vacancy rates, risks to income and Brexit questions would be better employed being directed towards the Director of Finance or whatever his title is this week to see what his views are on those, or the Chief Exec. I don't really think it's something for scrutiny to have an opinion on. We scrutinise, we don't make the policy.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lower. Does Council agree to receive the report?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. The report's received. If we now move on to item 7, as mentioned earlier, we've received an urgent question in relation to the pandemic from Councillor Cott, and this will be answered first before the question included on the agenda from Councillor Stone is taken. So if Councillor Cott will bear with me, I'll read it out for the benefit of people listening in. In light of media coverage in the last week or so, what lockdown measures does the leader of the council believe are appropriate for the region right now? And how do these differ from the restrictions most recently imposed by the government, given comments in the media recently? And I'll call on Councillor Forbes to reply to that question from Councillor Cott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's sometimes said that a week is a long time in politics. If so, a COVID week must be the equivalent of a year in normal life because things are moving so quickly at the moment. It's only a few short weeks ago that we had the first set of restrictions put in place at the request of LA7 leaders and the elected mayor from north of Tyne. But it's important to stress that at the same time as asking for those restrictions, which were based on exponentially rising rates of COVID numbers in our population, we also asked for a range of additional measures to support those restrictions. We asked for additional business support for those businesses that will be affected by the restrictions. We asked for support with communications. We asked for support with enforcement. And we asked for a number of additional resources in order to help us to implement these effectively and quickly. It's worth bearing in mind, Lord Mayor, that as Councillor Cott is perhaps alluding to in the question, there is a difference between what we asked for and what government granted. Firstly, in the restrictions, they failed to give us the exemption that we'd asked for around informal childcare arrangements for family members. And I know that a number of families around our city had a very stressful weekend because they weren't sure what their childcare arrangements were going to be the following week. Fortunately, we managed to put pressure on the government for them to overturn that decision. But we then also had major confusion, particularly as the second set of restrictions was announced without any involvement or discussion with local leaders about the timing of that, where the government shifted the strong advice for households not to mix, either in domestic settings or in pubs and bars, to that being a law not to mix in those settings. And the Prime Minister himself got into a muddle over whether or not people could meet outside of their households in beer gardens. That was something I'd pointed out the night before, which was a potential inconsistency, which one of his ministers didn't know the answer to on the radio that morning, and which the Prime Minister then failed to take into account of when he was asked about the very same question that afternoon. So I'm sorry to say, colleagues, that the original intent of the regulations and restrictions that were put in place have been fundamentally undermined by the lack of business support, which has created a constituency of people opposed to the regulations completely unnecessarily so, because of the impact they have on businesses, and also because of the chaos and confusion that's ensued instead of the consistent clarity of messages that we needed to ensure that members of the public took these seriously. We now have a patchwork quilt of different regulations in different parts of the country, all of which have been triggered by different levels of COVID numbers, and there's growing inconsistency. What we need, therefore, is a new approach. And that, I think, is what Councillor Cott is referring to, the letter that I have written alongside the leaders of Manchester, Leeds and Liverpool to the government, offering a new 5-point plan to move us forward, to get us out of the current position, because clearly what is happening at the moment, although the restrictions have had a damping effect, they've not had the impact that everybody would hope for reducing COVID numbers. So we're asking for local decision making, particularly involvement around any future discussion around restrictions, and local lockdowns to include a broader assessment than just absolute COVID numbers, but to include a consideration of economic impact too. We're asking for a locally controlled test and trace system rather than the current centralised and privatised one, which is just not serving our needs well at the moment. We're asking for an improved business compensation package, which will particularly protect jobs for businesses which would, in normal circumstances, be viable, but because of the strange circumstances that we're in the moment, are struggling. And the Chancellor has more or less washed his hands of these businesses and said it's up to individual business owners to determine whether they think they're viable. Well, of course, assessments of viability will vary according to each individual's appetite for risk, each individual's financial circumstances. And what we've not had from the government is any strategic support for the hospitality sector, the leisure sector, or the cultural sector, all of which we know are absolutely crucial for the success of Newcastle as a great northern city. We also have asked for financial support for everybody who needs to self-isolate, because the sad thing is that so many people are forced between choosing to do the right thing for public health or go out to work and continue to earn money. And we've also asked for improved monitoring of the impacts of the additional restrictions. As I said at the beginning, Lord Mayor, this is a very fast-moving environment. Things are changing rapidly, and it's very clear that we need to make sure that there is clear, consistent messaging, an effective test and trace system, appropriate business support, and the minimum restrictions in place for the shortest period of time necessary in order to get COVID under control in our city.
Thank you for that, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Cott, you want to come back? Councillor Cott. Are you muted?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, are you asking me to reply?
Yes, you want to follow that up?
Yes, something went wrong with my system, and it said I was on hold, so I do apologise for that. So I don't know what that was. Anyway, thank you very much, Councillor Forbes, for your response, most of which I managed to receive. Obviously, I do know that everyone is working very hard locally to try and get the right balance in terms of the restrictions. However, I do think that it could be suggested that after all the fanfares of the original restrictions came at the beginning of September, which you and others articulated, that you didn't get the balance right.
Can you make this a question rather than a speech?
Okay, yes. Well, yeah, okay. So the key point is, sorry, Lord Mayor, the key point is, in the most recent restrictions, one of the things that you have outlined is the need for a range of measures that you want to see in place. You've also been quoted as saying that you wouldn't like to see further restrictions being put in place, but the rhetoric seems to suggest that you will. How are you trying to reconcile those two positions?
Councillor Forbes.
I'm not entirely sure I follow Councillor Cott's question. He has sat through the same presentations I have today on what the figures look like. There is a suggestion which I've picked up through the rumour mill today that the government are about to announce further restrictions for the North East. I have to tell colleagues I have absolutely no way of confirming whether that is true or not, because nobody from government has spoken to me about the prospect of any further additional measures. My own view is that any additional measures, a tightening of the restrictions, particularly if they were done in one part of the North rather than the whole of the North, would be counterproductive, because people would simply look to move around to try to avoid them. And the focus on restrictions and the lockdown is not helpful, because it detracts from the bigger public health message, which is that we need to maintain social distancing, facial coverings, and good hand hygiene in all settings. And my worry about the way that which the government have messed the announcements up on successive occasions of the restrictions is that it detracts from those bigger public health messages, makes people worry about what is and isn't the right thing to do, and ultimately undermines the very important public health messages that I think both local and national government would agree on. So, Lord Mayor, I'm not entirely sure what the point is that Councillor Cott is trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is that I want to get us to a position where we have the least restrictions in place for the shortest period of time. But to do that, we need a new relationship with government to press the reset on test and trace and to get appropriate business support immediately to prevent thousands of job losses in the next few weeks in our city.
Thank you for that, Councillor Forbes. I've got two councillors who've indicated they want to ask supplemental questions. I'll just take those two. Councillor Copley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you. I think given the level of confusion that there is around for all of us, and it's quite frustrating, this government seems to do everything too late in terms of responding to this pandemic. It's really worrying. But given all of that confusion, I think what we would all like to know is there a clear roadmap in place for getting the city open again at the end of restrictions? You know, restrictions are one thing, but getting some level of normality back is something else altogether. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Councillor Copley. And you're absolutely right. Time and time again, this government had acted too slowly and with lack of clarity, and that has exacerbated the situation, in my view. The suggestion is that the government is going to move towards a tier system of perhaps red, amber, green, or 1, 2, 3. I don't quite know what that's going to involve, which will at least try to clarify at a national level what restrictions are in place in any one place at any one time. However, the concern that I have is that if that is just imposed on us without appropriate discussion about the exact nature and evidence from our test and trace intelligence around exactly how the virus is spreading, then yet again it will be a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't match our local circumstances. And my further concern is that once we're into a series of regulations and restrictions, it's very, very difficult to see a route out of them unless the government changes fundamentally its approach. The only place in the country which has seen restrictions lifted so far has been Luton. Many places have been in restrictions for 6, 8, 10 weeks now. And the challenge for government, and this is why there is an offer of help from us, is to ensure that we have a different approach, that we change the way in which our communities, our businesses are supported, and press a reset in the relationship, because otherwise we'll end up with a long, hard winter with recurring outbreaks. Every time there's a restriction, the numbers will start to go down, but then the restriction may be released and they'll go back up again. And that is not a sustainable position in the long term. We need to embed COVID safety in everything that's done in every quarter of our city. And we need to make sure that there is a roadmap through which involves a functioning test and trace system and hopefully ultimately a vaccine in order to ensure that we can get back to normality. But I have to tell colleagues, that is not likely to happen next year. It's much more likely to take longer than that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Ashby, are you muted? We can't hear you, Councillor Ashby. Are you muted?
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Yes, yes, it was, and the icon to allow me to unmute wouldn't pop up. I'd like to ask about the evidence that central government supplies the council before or after their lockdown announcements, and would the leader make it a policy objective to ensure that all councillors regularly share such briefings to central government and the data on which the decisions are made that affect the livelihoods and well-being of local people right down to ward level?
Councillor Ashby may or may not be aware that there's a dashboard available on the council's website which is updated on a daily basis with information about the current position in the city. If he hasn't seen it, I'd draw his attention to it. But the point he makes about government information is a really important one. We've had the debacle over the weekend of the 16,000 missing positive test cases for COVID. And this is a fundamental system failure, because it wasn't just 16,000 people missing from the numbers. It was 16,000 people whose contacts weren't traced in time, and therefore the risk of those people spreading the virus was much greater. And as a result of that system failure, that government incompetence, sadly, we're likely potentially to face further restrictions to come. That is absolutely unacceptable. It's a failure of the system of the highest order. And if it happened in a local authority, there will be demands for all sorts of investigations. As it is, the government are just trying to pretend it's a technical issue and they want to move on from it. But it does beg the question, can we make sure that we reconcile the data, which is why we have in the public health team employed additional data analysts to do exactly that, and to try to make sure that as much as possible, the data from the national system matches our own intelligence about what's happening on the ground. And finally, Lord Mayor, I'd just thank the public health team and the directors who produce the regular briefings which come out for members and for staff. They are very helpful, very informative, and I do encourage members to look at them and share them round other interested parties so that everybody is as informed as possible about not only what the situation is, but how we can all help to reduce the numbers.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. I'll now call on you to reply to the oral question which has been put from Councillor Stone, which is also in relation to the coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is, I have to say, turning into variations on a theme. However, the first thing to say is I don't accept the premise of Councillor Stone's question that Newcastle is somehow unique and different in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. He and I both sat through a presentation from the Director of Public Health earlier today, who highlighted two specific things going on in Newcastle. One, the issues relating directly to students, but secondly, the general rising tide of COVID in our population. And the rise reflects increases seen in other urban areas across the north. It's no surprise that we find a disease such as COVID mirrors the socio-economic distribution that we see in almost all diseases, whether that be types of housing, close proximity of living, and nature of employment. All these things contribute to an increased risk of transmission in populations such as ours. Liverpool, Manchester and Leeds are experiencing similar patterns of disease to those across the 7 local authority areas of the North East that have acted together to tackle this. Members will be aware that the return of students to universities and colleges across the country has been associated with outbreaks amongst young adults as they move into new accommodation and encounter their peers from across the country for the first time. This has certainly impacted on the pattern of cases across the city, but it's important to note, as the Director of Public Health reminded us earlier today, that even if the cases amongst those of student age were removed from the picture, the rate of cases in the city across other ages would still have reached the level at which interventions would have been initiated. The wider spread across the life course matters greatly because it's a signal of increased risk to older and vulnerable individuals in our community. The spread of COVID in these age groups is much less concentrated than the outbreaks that we've seen in young people. But this reflects a rising tide of infections across the population, where it's far harder to isolate and manage people by contact tracing approaches. The distribution of cases other than those of student age across the city continues to be quite disparate, and we are keeping these under close review and have been re-looking at cases passed on to us through NHS Test and Trace to see if we can establish additional chains of causation, any local characteristics or sources of infection against which we can act. And colleagues will have noted the warning words of the Chief Medical and Chief Scientific Officers in their press release with the Prime Minister on Wednesday. As a nation, we're now seeing community circulation of the virus at a rate of increase that is achieving critical levels. That's why, Lord Mayor and colleagues, we recognised the warning signs of an imminent increase in COVID in the city and took action back on the 12th of September. Prior to the beginning of that month, Newcastle had experienced an enviable run of low COVID infections since the lifting of the national lockdown. I fear that this may have led some to believe that the problem had resolved, despite our repeated warnings that it is not. I warned at the time, 2 months ago, that too many social settings were being opened up at once by the government without an effective test, trace and isolate regime in place. My sincere hope is that by taking action as promptly as we have, we can limit the duration of this second wave and restore a balance of the freedoms that are temporarily but necessarily curtailed for individuals against sustained control of viral spread of COVID-19.
Can you wind up, please, Nick? Is that it?
That's it.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Stone, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for the response, Councillor Forbes. I should clarify my question in respect of some of the wording. I think I was intending to convey that we were amongst the fastest rising cases in the country, which I believe is certainly true. We have been at the top end of the league table, as it were, for some time now, and certainly a couple of days ago we were by far the highest in the country. Councillor Forbes talks about the council's dashboard. Can he should know that this doesn't show the ward and neighbourhood level data in the same way that is available on the government site. Will he confirm to me that he recognises that there is a particular problem with neighbourhood level outbreaks in the city, particularly in certain parts of the city near the universities? And will he agree with me that it would be very helpful to provide the information on day-to-day changes in the ward and neighbourhood level data to the local ward members, so we can get a better picture of what is happening in our communities? And allied to that, will he also agree with me that it would be helpful to provide dedicated and specialised and targeted local messaging in that respect, because there is a particular issue, as people know, in the Schofield low heating area. Other parts of the city are similarly affected, and as we talked about in the member briefing earlier on today, it would be helpful if those messages could be relayed in our capacity as ward community leaders to our networks, and to help spread that message to combat this more effectively. Because at present, I don't think the council's corporate messaging on the COVID crisis has been specific enough about the particular threats that's faced by students in parts of the city. I think it would be beneficial to all of us if that information could be shared more widely. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So your question, you're asking for ward.
I'm asking him for to agree with me that it would be helpful to provide ward level data and ward level messaging as well in regard to particular problem areas.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The challenge that we have, and we have looked at providing ward level information, and we will continue to try to do so, is that the information that comes nationally then has to be analysed into the ward data sets. And that's a capacity that we don't have at the moment, although we will continue to try to work on it. And I appreciate the wish for members to see information at a ward level. So we will continue to see what we can do to provide that information. And Councillor Stone touches on another important aspect of the current situation. There is a perception in some quarters that this is just a student issue and only affecting some parts of the city. And I'm hoping that with the evidence that the Director of Public Health has presented earlier today to the City Futures Board, people can be disabused of that myth. This is something which is affecting all communities in all parts of the city to a lesser or greater extent, but the numbers are on the rise in virtually every age group and area. And this is something that we should all be concerned about. One of the things that I am most worried about is that we've already started to hear anecdotally of students being stopped and challenged about what they're doing in our city. That kind of community tension is something that I know all members will want to try to work to diffuse. And if there are any particular bits of information that the communications team can help provide to members at a local level, above and beyond the citywide information and advice that is being provided, then please do contact the head of communications for such information. But Lord Mayor, it's really important to stress that the three simple things that we can all do are hand hygiene, facial coverings, and social distancing in all settings.
Thank you for that. Councillor Higgins.
Yes. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, Leader of Council has already sort of touched on this in relation to my response, but does the Leader of Council share my own disappointment at the tone of this particular question, which appears to design just simply to get an easy headline and perhaps cast our city in a very unfavourable light, which I don't think is terribly helpful. And the second part of my question, Lord Mayor, is does the Leader of Council also agree that it is vitally important now that we get far greater local control over the measures that we introduce if we are to offset the chaotic approach by central government over many, many months to date? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wouldn't presume to question Councillor Stone's motives. I can be very clear that my motives are to try to limit the spread of COVID in our city and ensure that we have the systems in place to ensure that businesses and people can go back to life as normal as quickly as possible. And a lot of the work that we're doing with partners, and for anybody who listened into the City Futures Board today, you'll have heard an example of this, is embedding COVID safety in every corner of life in this city, whether that's businesses, our universities, our healthcare sector, our social care sector, and many more. And there's a huge amount of work going on because people recognise we're going to be living with COVID for quite some period of time. Just pretending it's all going to go away at the end of the year is not a suitable strategy for dealing with it. We're going to have to learn to adapt, to live with it, and to make necessary changes. But we are well on the way to becoming a COVID safe city. Many of the assurances that have been given to us demonstrate that. And I know thousands of businesses have done their utmost to make sure that they've got the right safety procedures in place. But that would be why, Lord Mayor, I think it would be a travesty of justice if the government were to close down the hospitality industry further as a knee-jerk reaction to rising numbers. Because I think the vast majority of our businesses, particularly in the hospitality sector, are operating very well indeed within the guidelines and ensuring that people in those premises are safe. And it's far better, in my view, for people to be out there enjoying those what those businesses have to offer in a safe way than it is to see things being driven underground and into house parties where there's much less visibility and much more likelihood of COVID spreading. And Councillor Higgins' second point, absolutely we need greater control over this at a local level. The government have failed and failed again through their centralisation and their privatisation. What we need to do is localise and integrate all of the systems and procedures here. We're doing that despite the government. We've got a strong set of partnership arrangements in the city. And what we're doing, I think, is really effective. But we're doing it despite the government rather than because of it. And I'm calling on the government for a change of heart to give us the powers that we need to make the best positive difference for our communities and businesses for the future. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. While I agree with Councillor Forbes that we can't be complacent about anywhere in the city, the statistics clearly show that Ousbourne Ward, or Schofield and Heaton Park, as the PHE call it, is topping the league tables of infections in the whole country. So there is a particular problem there. So I'd like to ask him in public, the question I asked him in camera earlier, is will he commit to facilitate two-way communications between the various people, stakeholders trying to deal with that outbreak and ward councillors, because obviously we understand the geography and demographics better than many. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. I guess you didn't observe the City Futures Board. I asked the Vice-Chancellor of Northumbria University exactly that question and asked him to get somebody in the university to contact you and your other ward colleagues directly.
Thank you for that, Councillor Forbes. If we can move on to agenda item 8, which is the report on employment and culture cabinet member update, I'll call on Councillor Bell to introduce the report.
Good evening, Lord Mayor. Good evening, colleagues. Lord Mayor, I thank you for the opportunity to present to Council the fantastic work that's been continuing through these challenging times. Can I place on record the Council's thanks to all staff, volunteers and partners that have helped keep Newcastle the great city that it truly is. I would like to draw attention to a sentence in my introduction. The steps we have already taken have built strong foundations for our recovery. We must continue to show resilience and strength in the difficult weeks, months and years to come. The importance of the city's transformation programme approved by Cabinet in November 2017 has been a long-term ambition of the council. By protecting and enhancing our heritage and architecture, yet aesthetically improving areas that need it to be encourage footfall and support business, we can ensure that Newcastle retains its role as the capital of the North East and maintain its status alongside other regional cities. We want to establish our city as a significant, unique European destination for tourism, business and investment, and create a place where the local people find jobs and opportunities and can continue to be proud of. To do this, we need to build our strengths and address our weaknesses, creating a modern, vibrant and welcoming city. Over the last few years, we have made great steps forward towards this. The partnerships we have built up in the city with the likes of NE1, city centre businesses and retailers has not only meant we're in a stronger position to move forward together, it means we're in a stronger position to lobby government so we can get the right financial support for those that need it. We have seen the start of the rebirth of our city centre with the improved Christmas market last year, the family-focused events as part of the Summer in the City, and the nationally recognised sporting and other events choosing Newcastle. Yet, despite having distinctive qualities that other UK cities don't, we have to accept that the ground has been lost to our contemporaries. We need to invest, be creative and innovative, and start pioneering once again to deliver and invigorate the heart of Newcastle. The spirit and the character of our people world is world famous, but our city centre has lacked investment in comparison to other major cities and does not reflect our passion, our pride. The transformation of our city centre will unlock the potential to create inclusive, active, clean, green and vibrant environments. Somewhere where we can celebrate all of the good about it and its people, and somewhere where people want to do business. COVID-19 has exacerbated the need for our ambitions to be released. The city centres throughout the UK have been hard hit by the pandemic, and its rejuvenation is now even more fundamental as the city centre looks to rebuild and strengthen. By investing in the transforming of our city centre and the releasing its potential, Newcastle can recover and become a city of growth and opportunity for all. The creation of jobs, income and business will help to unlock other parts of the city so the benefits can be shared and all areas have a chance to prosper. We want to revitalise and make a sustainable city and feel it is now the time to start working towards. We have seen how a reimagined streets to allow more social distancing and a new way of operating from cafes and bars have paid dividends. We now need to continue to create safer and greener spaces that people, particularly families, want to spend time in and somewhere that embodies the community spirit that exists in bucket loads across the city. We want to create a welcoming, vibrant and accessible space that we will help rejuvenate our streets and bring back life into the heart of Newcastle. Great cities don't stand still. Now, more than ever, we need to adapt and refresh to be progressive and unlock the city's full potential. Lord Mayor, may I present my report to Council, and as ever, I'm willing to answer questions from members. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. We do have some time to debate this report, and I'll call on Councillor Ashby.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I found the icon that time. And thank you, Councillor Bell and the Directorate of Place team for a substantial report, although I can't help thinking that some of it is a little bit historic. I'd like to direct a couple of questions to activities where the City Council has skin in the game, as it were, through spending and investment. Yesterday, while it was sunny, I cycled to the Granger Market for essential supplies, which can only be obtained from small and independent businesses there, like loose caffeine tea. As usual, I took the opportunity to ask several traders how things are going. Although it was around lunchtime, there was no problem about social distancing because they weren't inundated with customers. Even the excellent Indian street food place, which I recommend to all, including Singletons, who want a warm welcome in an historic location far different from modern chain store environments. And Lord Mayor, I did let Councillor Bell know I'd be giving them a plug. But their businesses do seem to be scraping along, but the improvement works still in progress don't encourage new customers. As it's been going for a year, can it be expedited so that they can get some normality in that aspect? I noticed at least 3 to let signs outside. What's the current occupancy rate in space and revenue terms? And is there any prospect of a substantial new entrance at the corner of Nelson Street and Granger Street? As a cyclist, although there are some bike racks, I wasn't at all sure which roads I should be on, so maybe signage could be reviewed. And just switching briefly to the new airport business park, which Tynex is developing, on whose board both Councillor Bell and I serve on behalf of the council, but whose internal deliberations are obviously commercially confidential. I welcome the news that Bellways HQ is close to opening, but can he tell us publicly about any prospects for other developments at this strategic site? And it almost goes without saying that I'm concerned about the loss of European grants and government foot dragging over the 100% replacements he mentions. Are you able to update us on progress on negotiations on this? There's plenty other to be asked for. I'll let others have a turn. And colleagues, do take a look at the Granger Market and other independent retailers have to offer. They're all a key part of the city's future build back better offer.
If you'll excuse me, colleagues, I did actually lose the connection for a few moments then, but I'm back. Councillor Avery. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is about regenerating disused and derelict sites, not just in the city centre, but across the city. And if a member could give a bit more detail about the sorts of things we're doing to bring sites that can be not just eyesores, but magnets for antisocial behaviour back into productive use. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Bell, I'll take all these contributions, then come back to you. Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is alludes to something that Councillor Ashby has just raised about the Granger markets. I'm aware that traders are particularly concerned about the length of delay that is going on with regard to the Granger Market's refurbishment, and there are, I understand, some significant problems with the roof and with other aspects of the redevelopment, which is having an impact, as well as the COVID impact, on their operations. And traders have contacted me to raise their concerns about this. I've tried to raise this with the director. I haven't had an update report back yet on the promised work from the contractors on this, but could Councillor Bell give me an indication of whether he's aware of these problems at the Granger Markets and what he's doing to sort that out as speedily as possible? Thank you.
Councillor Higgins.
Yes, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And can I thank Councillor Bell for, again, a very, very comprehensive report, which I think reflects many of the positive things that are happening in our city, but also the challenges that we face in these very, very uncertain times. And my question relates to the local economy, and particularly in relation to the entertainment and hospitality sector. And I think this is coming up in a later motion to council. So I'll just read out the substance of my question for Councillor Bell. The entertainment and hospitality sector has been particularly badly hit by the pandemic and faces a particularly uncertain future. Next year, we have the Rugby League World Cup and Magic Weekend coming to the city, which could be a tremendous boost to that sector. Are we liaising closely with the relevant bodies within that sport to seek to enable the return of fans, which is vital to both the sport itself, but also tremendously vital to our local economy? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Higgins just pretty much asked my question, but I'll ask the question anyway. Thank you, Councillor Bell, for your portfolio update. As you rightly pointed out, culture and sport events are at the heart of our city, and they'll play a major role in the revival of post-pandemic Newcastle. And I'm very excited that Newcastle will be hosting the Rugby League World Cup. If you can you give us an update on any planning in the event that we cannot still allow fans into St James's Park by October 2021? And how would this potentially impact the success of hosting this event for this city? Thank you.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Jed, for a fairly cogent and comprehensive report. My question focuses very much on unemployment and the impact it's having on a particular group, which too often is overlooked by central government and policymakers, and that's the plight of the over 50s. What steps does the City Council intend to take, working in partnership with other organisations, to address the skill needs and the other needs of the over 50s in both Newcastle and the North East in general? Thank you.
Councillor Lower. Councillor Lower?
Not me, Chair.
No. Councillor Kane? Councillor Kane, yes.
Yes, thanks, Lord Mayor. Sorry, icon problems as well. Thank you for the report to Councillor Bell. A couple of parochial issues appear on page 47. Under the list of successes, he lists the way I wheel. Does that mean that he is endorsing that development and thinks it works as part of the local cityscape? I'd be interested in his views. And also the development on New Bridge Street. One of the proposals cut the high-level pedestrian access into the city centre, and I was wondering if he could commit to maintaining that in future, particularly in the light of all the work on low-traffic neighbourhoods.
Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question before I invite Councillor Bell to reply? No. Okay. Councillor Bell, would you like to respond to what's been said?
Okay, thank you, Lord Mayor. Quite a comprehensive list that we have here. I'll start with Councillor Ashby, if I can, right at the beginning. And yes, I'll plug not just one of the traders in the Granger Market, but all of them. I think that we should all make an effort. That's not just us as councillors, but all the residents of Newcastle, to try to use the Granger Market and our local providers within the Granger Market. It not only helps them to sustain employment, but also it helps us to sustain the Granger Market. What I'd like to do as well is need to put on record our thanks to all of the stallholders and the staff at the Granger Market and the way that they've managed through the challenges of the pandemic. In particular, I'd like to mention, and this is quite, I'm stepping out of normal here in a response, I suppose, but I would particularly like to mention Emma and her father, John Phillips, stallholders within the Granger Market, who I've taken many opportunities to chat to, both pre and post and currently during the pandemic. They started off the Granger Market home delivery service. And I know Emma in particular was putting many, many hours in per day and per week trying to get this run on a very home-schooled type of basis. Not a professional job that she's done within IT, but she's managed fantastically with her father. I'd also like to thank people like TWAM, the Tynemere Archives and Museum staff, and other council staff that made it possible to have the deliveries of fresh produce right across the city, and also being able to deliver to some of the most vulnerable residents in the hardest of times. I will say, and it probably sums up a couple of the points made by other members, that the Granger Market remains one of the jewel in the crown of our great city, and we will all agree with that, I'm surely, undoubtedly. Unfortunately, the footfall has decreased during the pandemic, but that's on par with the rest of the city, and indeed it's in line with other major cities. Within my portfolio, you will see that it identifies that we have around about 2,500 property interests with a capital value of around about 450, I believe it is, and it secures around about £25 million in rent per annum. So the Granger Market is a part of that portfolio, And as everything, as within that portfolio, we have units let out, and people will pay us rent. What it does mean is that as the rent comes in, it also protects frontline services, but also it manages to put business plans together for things like the roof that has been mentioned on the Granger market. So the rents that are paid are quite simply keeping a roof above people's head in the Granger market at this moment in time. We've managed to, just to show how important the Granger market is, there's been around about £3 million worth of investment, which has been brought in through business plans put together, which has been based on footfall, turnover, rent intake. So it's in our benefit to make sure that, one, we work with the traders, but two, that we're also trying to keep it as effective, as efficient, and a place where people do want to go to shop, because if the businesses are successful, then the council gets the rents back. So it's been a hard time. Again, to answer a couple of the questions that were raised, it's not just one or two traders that we try to talk to. The team talk to as many traders as possible. There are sessions that are held now virtually, but there was successful meetings that was held together to inform members what progress was being made with the roof. I can now turn around and say that the contractor has made it COVID safe, so progress should be made on the roof is imminent, and they should be back to work, and we hope that we'll start seeing some benefit from that. But we want to be here for the long term with the Granger market. We'll continue to work with the traders, all of the traders, and we'll continue to have dialogue with them. And I know that some of them have already approached the council to see exactly what we can do for those that are actually struggling with some of their payments because of loss of income. We're doing that in the Granger market, but again, across the whole stock that we have across the city. Just to finish off on the Granger market, I do know, because it's a quiz question, is that there's 14 entrances. So I think Councillor Ashby mentioned whether or not we could have another entrance. I don't think we put any more entrances in, but part of the £3 million investment was to make sure that those entrances were secure, and that was an idea that came from the traders. So I'm glad that that has been brought forward and completed. Tynex board, Councillor Ashby, occupancy of the Granger market, I'll get the current figures back. There's obviously been changes since COVID, but I'll ensure that we get up-to-date figures, because they were actually they were brought to every meeting that we had with the traders, so that everybody has an up-to-date view of that. It was quite high occupancy the last time that we looked. COVID undoubtedly would have had some effect. I couldn't say at this moment in time, off the top of my head, if any stall holders have handed the keys back in to see it, but I'll certainly get them. Tynex board, as you mentioned, there are confidential items that I discussed at the Tynex board. I'll get the details of that. I should declare an interest as a board member, and I'll get the if Councillor Ashby sends me a detailed email. He's a board member himself, so I dare say he has the information. Then I dare say that we can answer all of them points through email. Councillor Avery, derelict sites. Sorry, it was Councillor Avery. Derelict sites was classed across the city. We might know them as brownfield sites. Used to. They've been identified in the development allocations plan. Successes. There's one huge success, which is actually in his ward, which was derelict since it was an old school, which is now a very, very popular housing estate. And that was brought forward with partners. Another one, which people tend to forget about, which was a brownfield site, is the new Rise, Scotswood, the new estate of Scotswood. That was a brownfield site. So we've got many successes across the city, and we'll continue to focus in on them, because we have managed to develop them and get developers to take them on. Not just the high value sites across the city, but also the brownfield sites. Councillor Stone, refurbishment of the roof. I think I've managed to cover that earlier, but I will get updates from the developer, from the company that's doing the roof work, and I'll get that back to you exactly what the programme is. Councillor Higgins, hospitality sector hit. Yes, we all know it is, and we'll be discussing that later on. Within my report and the fact about the city centre investment programme, I think this is the only way that we'll actually help the hospitality industry within the city centre. But again, as I mentioned, the spin-offs of this, by having a healthier, greener community within the city, means that people want to come here, they want to visit here, but also they want to stay here. And this is one of the main attractions, together with events that actually I've had many conversations with investment companies that wish to come to the city centre. And one of the things they do mention is because Newcastle is a vibrant place to be. And how do you get all of these events on? We will continue to put events on. It's hard at this moment in time because anybody that goes to see music concerts, for instance, or through the theatre will see that not only have they been closed, but every time that a new concert is booked in, one will tend to drop off because they have to delay it yet again. And that's basically what we're doing with events. We're making sure that there's a program of events, but it's changing all the time. So we've had great successes working with many promoters, and one of the most recent ones was at Gosforth Park, which became world renowned for the safe way to hold events, and that could be the future of events for some time to come. So we welcome that coming back next year, and we'll see new artists coming, and hopefully it can be even bigger next year. So we will continue to work like that. We are in regular contact with both forms of rugby, as well as, this is where Councillor Avery came in, which was St James's Park and events. Again, we want St James Park to be open. We want to see the return of Premiership football. We want to make sure that the Rugby League World Cup can come to St James Park and to Kingsland Park. We want to make sure that events can happen here, but only when it's safe to do so. So we'll continue to monitor. We will be in constant dialogue, and we will be looking for ways that will make sure that people can actually access the facilities and enjoy the vibrancy of our city centre. Councillor Lambert, Councillor Kane, that was New Bridge Street access, I believe. Yes, there's a developer which is willing to, has signed up and put plan applications in early stages to develop the hotel site. We want to improve alternative access, not just vehicle access, but those for cycling and those for pedestrianisation into the city centre. And we will continue dialogue to make sure that not only bridge access is granted into the city centre on that opportunity, but also on other opportunities as they arise. We do want to make sure that Newcastle is an accessible city for all, and that's how we will be doing it through developments that's oncoming.
The YI as well, please, Jeff.
Oh yes, the YI, yes. Am I in favour of investment coming to the city? Am I in favour of 800 jobs? Yes, I am. I know that the YI is in some people's eye has been controversial, but to me, for Newcastle to be on the world map and to have another form of entertainment that's going to bring people to the city to come as a tourist attraction has got to be a good thing. So to put it bluntly, I'm a huge fan of any attraction like the YI observation platform coming to the city. And again, it goes back to the point about derelict sites. The site has remained derelict for a number of years, and it's through working with partners that we've managed to bring that back. So I'm waiting with bated breath for the work to start on Spillers Quay.
You've got about half a minute, Councillor Bell.
Oh, Lord Mayor, I thought there was more questions put in, so I thought I'd have more time with my colleagues. Councillor Lambert, I'm going to cut this short, but some of the figures that were released yesterday about unemployment, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he was quoting 750,000 more people unemployed since the start of the pandemic. But I've done a little bit of research today, and there's what's called the HR1 figures released yesterday. These are the notices that to be registered when an employer is going to make more than 20 people redundant from an employment. The figure shows that employers have listed more than 380,000 positions at risk, so that's additional to that. This is going to be the worst time that we have ever seen Newcastle, with everything that I've mentioned before, including events, including making sure that Newcastle is an accessible city, including that we're progressive, and making sure that we can stride forward. That's going to make sure that we have employment here in the city centre. We need to continue with programmes such as the Business and Intellectual Property Centre. We need to continue in Newcastle Futures, Job Centre Plus, community-led local development. The government's pledges, we need more. The programmes like Kickstart, Job Retention Scheme, Job Support Scheme, Self-Employed Support Scheme. It's a start, but it's not enough. And we need that to be tailored to what the needs are in the city. And I just wish, instead of mixed messages, that the government would actually turn around and listen directly to what we're saying, because we know best what actually is needed here in Newcastle. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bell. I'm sure that you'll be willing to accept email follow-ups on that. Does Council agree to receive the report?
Agreed. Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
Agreed. No objections. I'm hearing that it does.
Agreed.
Thank you. So if we can move on to the next report on environmental and regulatory services, I call on Councillor JP Stevenson to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm delighted to present this report to full council this evening. I'm going to say delighted. I hope I will be able to, because the hamster in my modem has been really struggling tonight. So if I get cut off, I may need to switch off my video, but we'll see how it goes. But the report reflects the incredible work of our staff in what has been a very challenging year. On occasions like this, it is customary to thank our staff, but thanks are never more due than they are now. Since COVID hit us, they've gone the extra mile and beyond. Some of that detail is in the report, but to pick out a couple of things, our local services team came up with innovative ways of tackling the new normal and collecting bins throughout lockdown in a way which is safe for our residents. And we saw all the photographs in the local media about how residents really appreciated and valued our staff for the work they did. And thanks to residents too for showing that appreciation. It really helps with, motivation. Carrying on from Councillor Bell's report, actually, Councillor Bell mentioned the events at Gosforth Park, which were clearly really successful from a cultural point of view, but they were also really successful from a regulatory perspective too. The safety measures there were really comprehensive. Social distancing, with staff on hand to jump in on the rare occasions that some people occasionally forgot to conform. It was really, really well handled, and I'd like to extend my thanks to the organisers for the way they conducted those events to provide our city with a great service. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank councillors too for their patience and recognising the incredible pressure our staff are under. It's been vital the resources are directed to the ongoing work to keep people safe, support our licensed premises, and the other unforeseen pressures which has been thrown at them. So sometimes emails may take a little bit longer to respond to. So, again, thank you very much for your patience. And that's all I will in my summary, Lord Mayor, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stevenson. A number of people have indicated they want to speak and/or questions, so I'll start with Councillor Lower.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of quick points. I was just wondering, given the current situation with COVID, before we went into the first lockdown, we had a discussion and we talked about the trade and getting together with the licensed trade to talk about offers and, cheap drink offers and things. And I just wondered what contact you'd had and what discussions were ongoing with the trade about that. And the second part is we licensed an awful lot of taxi drivers during the lockdown, and I just wondered what was happening about safeguarding training for them. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Stevenson, for your report. As we all know, this time of year, especially fireworks, can become a nuisance for residents. I'd just like to know if you could explain what work the council is doing to regulate the sales of fireworks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kane.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Stevenson, for the report. a long one as usual, given the breadth of the portfolio. I'm glad waste contamination, particularly recycling, is finally being taken seriously. But I'm sure others are the same. I'm still getting complaints from residents that they have been instructed by Envirocall operators to mix glass in with other waste, which must be a big part of the ongoing contamination problem. Something that's new in the report is this talk of opt-in pilots in recycling. That concerns me, because is this opt-in to get your own recycling bin, or is it opting into recycling full stop? Because there's no way, if we want to be a zero waste city, we should be expecting residents to opt into that. Recycling should be the default, not the extra. So I'd be grateful for some clarity on that. You mentioned the waste contract with the other councils. It takes me back to 2000, the change of control, and Councillor Taylor and I were trying to boost recycling in the city, and the one thing that was holding us back was the then 25-year waste contract that the previous Labour administration had signed. So my heart sank when I saw that the current one had signed a 29-year-old waste contract, because whatever we know, the waste situation will be different in 29 years as it is now. And I was wondering if he could explain how that contract is future-proofed. And lastly, related to contamination as well, but overlapping the more regulatory side of things, is bin jacking in communal bins is becoming a very real problem, where businesses are putting trade waste in wheelie bins, whether they're domestic bins, recycling bins, filling up everybody's bins. The crews sometimes don't open them, and it is becoming a very big problem. So I would like his views on that as well, please. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Higgins. Councillor Higgins, are you muted? We'll come back to you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a couple of things. In your report, John Paul, you mentioned the pilot for delivery of energy efficiency regulations to improve the quality of private rental properties. And I was just wondering if you could say what that pilot had achieved, what happens next, and how many of our current rental properties actually reach the minimum standards. And just another quick question. You mentioned inspection of food premises, and I just wondered how whether that has been able to proceed as normal during the COVID epidemic, and were we certain that food premises are still being kept safe, as they are obviously being used quite a lot more, particularly for takeaways, etc.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins, are you with us yet? No. Councillor Ashby then.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thanks to Councillor Stevenson for his report, but I am considerably alarmed at the thought that these what were supposed to be COVID temporary concerts at the Gosforth Racecourse are going to be back even bigger next year. And I think, Councillor, you need to know that there's a considerable noise nuisance among the residents in quite a radius, in fact 2 miles away, outside of the city council's area. People can complain that their children couldn't go to sleep because of this noise, and there is within many property contracts quiet enjoyment clauses, and I think that the people of North Gosforth would really like quiet enjoyment, and I think they will view with horror the possibility that this will be back, even more of this next year.
Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Stevenson for the report. I'd just like to echo Councillor Stevenson's thanks as well to staff, and I know that residents have asked me in the past to pass on thanks to individual members of staff who have done a particularly good job. I'd just like to ask, if I can, about fly tipping and what's been done to address this problem over the last year, and what work's going to be done in the future to tackle that problem as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazel Stevenson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, Councillor Stevenson, thank you for the comprehensive report that you've given. It covers a wide variety, as you would expect, of aspects of your portfolio. One of the things I would concur with is the way our staff, particularly our bin people, have actually conducted themselves. We're always very proud of the work that they do. Residents as well do comment on that. But during this pandemic, as you've already said, they have gone over and above, and they've always been pleasant and had a smile on their face. And it has been very trying, testing, and very difficult times. So certainly I personally have witnessed some of the staff go really over and above board with some of our more vulnerable residents. And I would also concur with a reference made to the cold calling zones on page 59 of the report. In my own ward, which has got 100% of this across the ward, I know how difficult things have been during this pandemic. And ultimately, the situation around vulnerable people very sadly being targeted by people cold calling. So I'm delighted to see there's more of this happening across the city. And in addition to the price gouging by businesses, which again is absolutely appalling to think of people doing that, but it has happened. I'm delighted to see that the Trading Standards Officer today has sent a letter out, a copy of the letter from Councillor Dodds, Chair of the Joint Committee, which has gone to the Minister on our thoughts on that. So hopefully some action may be taken. During this period of time, obviously we have mentioned the situation about food premises. I can personally say that I've had dealings recently with a number of concerns, and our officers have been out and actually gone and done visits to a number of them that have sprung up during the pandemic, and also at a situation during the time that we're in where we're asking questions of the standards. So they have been doing that. But one of the questions I've been asked actually this last week and a half, more than anything else, is around recycling. And it's specifically around the recycling of pizza boxes. Now, I know we've all had the information about what can and cannot be recycled, but I just think, can we have clarity on that tonight? Because clearly new people coming into a variety of areas, not just particularly students, but people buying takeaway food in a way that they wouldn't maybe normally. This has certainly come up with me quite recently. I've had 3 calls on this today, which I find incredible. But can you please just give us an answer to that? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins, are you with us yet? No.
Indeed, Lord Mayor. Yes, I am,
are.
Lord Mayor. I'm here.
Go on.
So I can come in belatedly, can I?
Yes.
Just to say, well, I'm sorry I got lost for a while, but can I thank Councillor Stevenson for his report? I think I'm right in saying it's his first report in his new cabinet portfolio. So welcome to a very, very challenging portfolio, but I'm sure that you'll manage very successfully. My question relates to an issue around fly tipping, because we know that during the lockdown period, it became a real problem in many, many parts of the city, and it was raised by a number of people. So I'll just read out my question, Lord Mayor, very quickly. Is during the period of the lockdown, illegal fly tipping and litter was reported as a problem in many areas of the city. I am therefore delighted at the success in my own ward of the spring clean mentioned in the report, and the rigorous enforcement action as reported taken against many environmental offenders. The engagement with private landlords is also a particularly positive step. Could the Cabinet member please suggest ways that we can build on this success, and in particular the role of local ward councillors in this process? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I don't know whether you heard Councillor Barnes ask a similar question just a few minutes ago. We've got a little time. One more question if anyone's in there. No, so Councillor Stevenson, you've got 11 minutes to respond.
I'll try to do it in 10 and a half. Okay, so thanks for all of those questions. There's a lot there, so forgive me if I skim through them, and I might have to come back on some of the details. Councillor Lower asked about a student office. Now, I have made some notes. We can... Sorry, give me 2 seconds. In fact, I'll answer the one about safeguarding, because that is the government deferred training, safeguard training for taxi drivers, and we haven't entertained any new driver applications until recently. But in the meantime, the course materials have been sent to the applicants in advance, so they can prepare for when the time comes. In terms of student office, we have the enforcement teams proactively visiting premises to ensure the social distance measures and all other regulatory framework are being conformed to. It's not always as much about how cheap they are, it's about how people are behaving. We can regulate on irresponsible promotions. As far as I know, we have only had one case where the police have contacted us. It's not for me to name the premises tonight, but they have recently contacted us, and we have intervened there. The biggest issues were not always students, actually. We served some prohibition notices on bars who were acting irresponsibly and watching their patrons get incredibly intoxicated and jump from the swing bridge into the Tyne, which isn't the best idea. Councillor Durant asked about fireworks, and I've had multiple concerns raised, so thank you very much for raising this. Across the city, I know a number of charities such as the Dogs Trust. I mean, fireworks sound fun, but they have a real impact upon pet anxiety, and other vulnerable people in the city as well. The council, as far as what the council does, we work with the police and the Tyne Fire and Rescue Service. We make proactive visits to licensed premises to check legality and storage. And there's several legislation frameworks we can use, such as it's illegal, for example, it's illegal to supply adult fireworks to under 18s. Councillor Kane. Thank you for raising the issue about mixed glass in blue bins. I haven't heard of any problems with that before, but I'll pass that on to the team. And if misinformation is being given, I will be very clear that glass is not meant to be deposited within the general unit of the blue bin. If we don't have a caddy for one reason or another, it is better to separate it and deposit at a supermarket. But the message is clear: don't mix in the unit itself. The opt-in recycling scheme is for bins, shared bins, and all residents are informed by letter of what is going on. The recycling improvement project, which is got quite it's made its way around the city actually, and it's been really successful, that project. You're absolutely right, recycling should be the default, and it is. Reuse and recycling are our priorities to meet our targets. The bin checking, it's difficult to address the bin checking one you're raising on communal bins, because we find that a lot of people are breaking the locks, and we do fix the locks, but no sooner do we fix them, someone comes with a crowbar or whatever and breaks them again. We are looking at different mechanisms to try to make the lids more secure, but it doesn't matter what we do, people find a way to break them again. Councillors Higgins and Barnes asked very similar questions actually about fly tipping, and it is something we take really seriously. We take waste crimes really seriously, and Councillor Higgins, you've mentioned some of our successes about how our successes in prosecutions. We do liaise with landlords, and we use the additional licensing scheme to tackle the problems as well. Residents are encouraged to report any issues online, but if we have any evidence, to contact the PSR team. And it's also great that some councillors are getting really involved in the one. I think Councillor Barnes and Higgins actually are involved in activities in the wards to tackle the problem litter. I know you are, Councillor Higgins, in Benwell and Scotswood, and you regularly patrol the area with the housing associations to have a look at the issues there. Councillor Taylor, the food hygiene inspections have actually been continuing as planned. My signal dropped out for a second. I think you asked another question, but I didn't quite catch it. But feel free to email me and I'll complete the detail there. Councillor Ashby asked about the Gosforth Park events. I have to be honest, I am not aware of, well, I'm only aware of a very small amount of complaints that the teams received, and I personally only received one. There was an enormous amount of care about the regulation and noise nuisance. There was a lot of care over the noise levels. Our teams were on hand to give them guidance to agree the levels so that it wouldn't be a nuisance for neighbouring properties. I thought the events ran really smoothly, and they weren't. My experience does not reflect your question, I'm afraid. And Councillor Hazel Stevenson, accompanied by her K9, raised the issue of pizza boxes, and you're right, there is some confusion of people recycling pizza boxes because they are made of cardboard. But the problem with pizza boxes is that if supermarket ones are fine because the foods are wrapped in cellophane, which isn't contaminated by the food, so they're fine. But the ones you get from takeaways, the slightest trace of food or even grease could cause an entire batch of recycling to be rejected by the paper mill. So although if you're completely confident that the lid of your box isn't contaminated, that is fine to go in the bin. You can cut it off and put that in the recycling bin. That's fine. But in terms of for the greater good, if there's any doubt, it is actually better to put it in the residual waste to stop the rest of it from being rejected by the paper mill. I think I answered most of those, Lord Mayor. As always, I'm happy for people to contact me directly, and I'll offer the opportunities for, if anyone wants to have a chat at any point, we can set up a Teams meeting as well. That I'm more than happy to do that. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank
Sorry,
you, Councillor
Councillor
Stevenson.
Stevenson. I didn't get an answer on the waste contract question.
Councillor Stevenson, are you still with us?
I am, yeah. The waste contract question, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Kane.
You've got 90 seconds.
Okay, I'll take 75. It's a massive work in progress, and as you say, between the North East local authorities. So we're looking to, how to maximise that. We're looking to future-proof that. We know from our work in the from our work in climate change that we need to be producing working documents, working arrangements, because things change, contracts have changed. So everyone involved is very conscious of the need for flexibility in the future. Thank you, Loma.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stevenson. Then, does Council agree to receive the report?
Agreed.
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 I'm not hearing any no's.
Agreed.
So that is agreed. If I move on to quickly the appointments, are the appointments agreed as set out on the supplemental agenda that's being provided? Not hearing any.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. No dissenters? No. If we then move on to the next item, which is the emergency notice of motion we're going to take now, protecting the hospitality sector in the city, as mentioned previously. So I'll now call on Councillor Kemp to move this motion, which is to be seconded by Councillor Forbes. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is an emergency for the more than 10,000 people employed in the hospitality sector. I believe that we as a City Council have a role to play in providing a strong voice of support for the industry in our city and those supply chain businesses. And importantly, let's not forget, as the government does, the great many freelancers who've received little support so far. These people, all who contribute enormously to our city through significant and varied roles, could face unemployment and business closure if urgent action is not taken by the government. Chancellor Sunak, the hedge fund operator whose personal wealth is estimated to be around 200 million, talks of jobs and businesses not being viable and suggests people should retrain. This is frankly insulting. What is needed is support for these existing and valuable jobs. The hospitality sector needs the support to go with the restrictions. I know many in the sector in this city feel betrayed and scapegoated. This is understandable and why I bring this emergency motion to make a public statement of support and to be absolutely clear in what we ask of government. We respect and value the contribution of the bar and pub staff, the kitchen crews and chefs, restaurants and cafe workers, nightclub workers, technicians, freelancers, all working, often unseen, ensuring that evenings out and the entertainment that we all have the chance to enjoy are delivered so brilliantly and apparently effortlessly. Businesses in the sector are already operating in a well-regulated environment. Many have made further investment to ensure continued safe operations. A considerable number have incurred losses and rental debts from the 3-month lockdown, and the new restrictions will reduce trade to a level where they will simply not be viable without meaningful support. There seems to be a completely flawed perception that the 10 p.m. curfew somehow means just one more hour less of trading. This shows a complete lack of understanding of the current reality of trade. Only today did we hear Professor Callum Semple state the 10 o'clock curfew does not work where there is a nighttime economy. Staff costs, already the largest cost alongside property, have now gone through the roof, increased through the practical implications of the restrictions. Sector-specific restrictions merit sector-specific support. Recent government announcements have all purported to be about saving viable jobs. These businesses are perfectly viable under normal circumstances. It's the government's own restrictions which have currently rendered them not so. To not support them now is frankly scandalous. To not support them now would ensure that many of these jobs and businesses are not viable in the future. In all their decision making so far, it seems clear that the government either doesn't understand or simply doesn't care that the hospitality sector directly provides the livelihoods of thousands of families and sustains the viability of thousands more in the supply chains. Why is the government happy to support big chains and corporates, yet provides little or no support for the multitudes of idiosyncratic small businesses, the very ones that best present and indeed create the local identity of our city? The government, insisting on a privatised and clearly unviable test and trace system, exacerbated the need for many of the restrictions now damaging the hospitality sector. These businesses need actual help with their payroll and cash flow so they can protect the valuable jobs they have created. It is cruel to talk about the help for hospitality when the outcome of imposing restrictions without providing adequate and reasonable support means that many are at immediate threat, resulting in job losses. This surely cannot be the intention of government policy, can it? These businesses are so much more than simply being a pub, bar, cafe, restaurant or venue. Providing a warm welcome, a place of entertainment, they are a refuge, are frequently the one point of social interaction, the only conversation of the day, the one cooked meal, a safe haven from all that life is throwing at us. In times such as these businesses and people working in them provide the very respite we need. The workers in these businesses are our friends, confidants, councillors, and they are there no matter what. The people who operate these hospitality businesses are another frontline service, often working long and socially challenging hours, paid adequately but certainly not excessively. People have invested time, energy, and not infrequently their life savings to build businesses which help shape our city.
You've 30 seconds.
We have award-winning pubs, bars, cafes, music venues, restaurants and breweries, and yet we hear from the government that they are not viable. Without suitable support, a great many of these businesses will not be there. I reiterate, these are viable businesses and need to be supported. The support asked for the government through emergency motion I bring this evening, I believe is measured and reasonable. In the words of David Byrne, we're not little children and we know what we want, and the future is certain. Give us the time to work it out. Lord Mayor, let us not be on the road to nowhere. I urge Councillor to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. I'll now call on Councillor Cott to move an amendment, which will be seconded by Councillor Ashby.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you very much for bringing this motion, Councillor Kemp. We too recognise the importance of the hospitality sector to the local economy. Today, it was quite stark in the City Futures Board meeting that I attended, and we had a presentation just about the city centre, and it was quite clear how much impact and how much pressure is brought to bear on the leisure sector, including the hospitality sector. And I agree entirely with the points that you've made about the importance of hospitality in terms of shaping the identity of the city and the fabric and the fabric of small businesses and opportunities for employment that is created through this sector. So we obviously have to do what we can to help the sector and particularly at this time. There is significant hardship for the sector already, as we know, for many of the reasons mentioned by Councillor Kemp. And we have heard over the last number of months since March, a number of tragic stories around the pressures that small businesses, in particular in the hospitality sector, have been under. And we know, unfortunately, there may be some businesses which never open again, and that is a great regret. And we have to do what we can to protect those businesses that exist. Otherwise, the whole of the city risks being hollowed out. We, however, do recognise the nature of the public health situation, the crisis that we face, and the need for a range of responses. We have been broadly in support of a range of lockdown measures as they have come into being. The first lockdown, of course, and then a more recent one. And we have to make sure that all businesses are protected as part of that in the thinking behind these measures. We put forward our own motion on this paper for this meeting about the furlough scheme. And we believe that we want to see assistance to a range of sectors, as well as the hospitality sector, which the furlough scheme could help us with. In that context, whilst we are supportive of the sentiments expressed by Councillor Kemp, we're not clear as to why it was so necessary to bring this additional motion when our motion on the extension of the furlough scheme would have covered many of the issues that he is concerned about, and we share those concerns. Our motion would have called, and will still call, if we get to debate it tonight, on the government to save many jobs in Newcastle in a range of sectors, including the hospitality sector, which is so very important and is so under pressure because of the range of measures that are in place since the September lockdown. Another sector we have to think about, which perhaps is connected to this, of course, is the cultural sector, which tends to get ignored, I think, in many ways. And we need to reinforce the fact that the lockdown has affected a range of different sectors of our economy. And let's think of that sector as well, alongside a range of other sectors, businesses across the city. Our scheme in our motion, and I reiterate it here, calls for the retention of that job retention scheme and its renewal, measures to support the left behind sectors, and for the self-employed. So, in summary, we welcome many of the measures in the original motion, But we do have some concerns about why it was necessary to bring this additional motion. We have there could be a lot of speculation about this. I'm sure that Councillor Kemp is quite interested in these issues and talks quite passionately tonight about these issues. That it does seem peculiar that it's come in this format. Surely if this was such an important issue, the Leader of Council might have led on this, for example. So another issue that we have is, given that this motion was constructed very recently, it doesn't seem to make much reference, perhaps it does implicitly, but not explicitly, to the range or the context of the additional restrictions that we have in place over the last few weeks, and potential for further restrictions moving forward. Note, for example, action which is taking place in Scotland in relation to this particular sector just today. We are concerned and hope to be...
Find out, please, Councillor Carr.
We are concerned, we hope to be reassured that this isn't a politicking motion, that this is one which is there to genuinely highlight these issues. There is a danger of gesture politics here, and we want to see that all angles and support are covered properly. We're called upon to debate. So I recommend this amendment to you, Councillor Kemp, and I hope that you will see it as a friendly amendment and to say that we support the range of measures that you're interested in, but we want to see them in a broader context. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Ashby. Councillor Ashby, are you muted?
Beg your pardon, Lord Mayor. This week, as an investor in the city centre, I sat in on Chion Waru's virtual surgery for businesses in the city. Of all the problems caused by the responses to the pandemic, it was the plight of someone in the hospitality sector that struck the deepest. He's used his business rate support grant to support his staff. He's used a loan to support his staff. He's used furlough to support his staff. As constructed by the government, he cannot afford to support them through the jobs return scheme. He's personally guaranteed the rent on his premises, secured against his home. Within a few weeks, he's telling his staff they're going to lose their jobs. He's going to lose his business, his income, and probably his home. Cheap beer is not the answer to his problems. As we very much hope to discuss in the Liberal Democrats' motion on furloughing, which this motion is likely to push out unless Labour agrees to suspend standing orders to allow it, we propose measures that will be significantly more value to employees in the hospitality sector than cheap beer. We propose the furlough payments which support workforces and prevent job losses to be continued. We propose that job return payments for workers be less reliant on contributions from employers whose businesses are close to wipeout. We propose that the benefits of those already out of work should be increased. All these would be real, practical, here and now support for local people. And if Scotland is a trailblazer, more tightening is not very far away. We welcome Labour's conversion here to the alternatives to business rates, which we Liberal Democrats have been advocating for many years. But to suggest that any complete overhaul could be devised, consulted, legislated and introduced before the hospitality sector reopens is a recipe for disaster. Many more businesses would fold before that could happen. But oh dear Lord Mayor, I cannot in any conscience advocate for cheap beer, nor would the Chief Constable, who reports to us on public order issues in the city centre caused by alcohol, and the Director of Public Health, who reports to us on alcohol-related deaths. And as the leader himself said this morning on Radio Newcastle, alcohol and social distancing don't mix. Nor, I believe, should a motion of this council reinforce stereotypes of the North East. We need leadership in the city and region. We don't need to be known as the cheap beer city. Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, has been a powerful, inclusive advocate of locally based and effective track and trace. Andy Street, the West Midlands Mayor, has brought together all businesses, parties and sectors to advocate for the rebuilding of their position as the fastest growing English region. Where's our regional leadership? Where's our city leadership asking for cheap beer? This is a desperately ill-conceived idea which has to do more with the leadership within the Labour group than the leadership needed in these grave times. Lord Mayor, I support the amendment on behalf of the businesses and employees in the hospitality sector and the safety of their customers.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. There are a number of people who have indicated they wish to speak. Can I ask them please to keep to the allotted 3 minutes? Councillor Stone.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm aware of the dire situation many hospitality businesses are facing, and I know that at least one of my constituents is very gravely concerned about the future of several businesses in the current situation. I spoke earlier in my supplementary about locally specific messaging, and I do have some concerns about mixed messages that have been put out by the council recently on the issue of restrictions. That possibly has not been helped by Keir Starmer's comments at Prime Minister's question time earlier today, in which he seemed to suggest that he and Labour had concerns about the evidence base for the 10 p.m. restriction, and that he and his colleagues may be opposing extending restrictions in Parliament in due course. The Leader of Council has been prolific in the media recently. He appears on the news channels seemingly several times a day, and I heard him talking to Alfie Joey on Radio Newcastle this morning. Now, I admire his omnipresence, but I expected some variations in his messaging from day to day. It would appear to me that he and his LA7 colleagues did in fact seek to lobby government for further restrictions. I saw his double act on the gates of Quayside with the Police and Crime Commissioner when the restrictions were announced. I can certainly understand that Leader has valid criticism of the way the government has handled the COVID crisis. There are many aspects which are suboptimal, including in relation to business support and jobs. But I found it ironic that one of his regular themes is criticism of the government's mixed messages. As I say, I do feel there has been an issue with mixed messaging at local level too. I think the Leader has sought to take credit for lobbying for the restrictions and then tried to blame the government when local backlash to those restrictions became apparent. The Deputy Leader told at a recent Teams meeting I was taking part in that she was concerned that people are beginning not to trust what the Council is saying on this, which is clearly not helpful in seeking to encourage public compliance with the guidance. I think greater consistency and greater clarity on the core messages is clearly helpful, and I observe the Leader has focused heavily today on the hands, face, space message. I offer no view on Councillor Ford's motivation for doing so. I make no comment on whether he is using this, as he seemed to do on Radio Newcastle this morning, to deflect questions about what it is the Council actually wants to see on the topic of restrictions. That is very much, as the Leader has suggested, a fast-moving issue. He tells us he is not aware of suggestions that further restrictions are on the way. But it's notable to some of us who follow the national media, the government has been pre-briefing that further restrictions on cities in the north of England are imminent, maybe before the end of this week. There are even suggestions that the relationship between Newcastle and the government have strained somewhat recently. If the government are indeed anticipating further measures, they may not be inclined to go out their way to keep the council administration in the loop. Now, I reiterate that there are many reasons to be critical of the way the government is handling the outbreak, but I think it's clearly in the interest of everyone in the city, especially the hospitality sector, for the lines of the communication with the government to be kept open. It's in the public interest for there to be constructive engagement between the council and government to ensure that any further measures are beneficial to tackling the crisis locally and are beneficial in terms of financial support for hospitality businesses and jobs. I know that the administration likes nothing better than blaming the Tory government and asking for more money, but on this issue, it will be a very good idea indeed to maintain a constructive dialogue with them to ensure that the help that the sector badly needs in this city will indeed be forthcoming. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Frew.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a very strange idea of a friendly amendment. I mean, the Lib Dems are asking to kneecap the measures the industry has specifically been begging for. It's not about cheap beer, it's about running costs and short-term finances. More importantly, it's about jobs. And it's sad that the Lib Dems are trying to politic this. So there's a bit of my anger out of the way, and I want to get to the point and what I've prepared for tonight. Yesterday, industry leaders said that there are far more than 500,000 jobs at risk before the end of the year without intervention for the government in this industry. So in addition to the 42,000 deaths so far, unemployment, especially youth unemployment, threatens to be one of the most damaging and long-lasting impacts of this disease. Many jobs in the industry support young people who are not able to absorb that blow, and universal credit is little reassurance. It's difficult to understate how damaging prolonged unemployment can be on young people's well-being and future prospects, and that's what's very likely to happen in this current climate. I still know many people working in food and hospitality from when I was, and I really worry for their sakes. It would take an extremely callous chancellor to write off these jobs. And it's also a really strange time that the Labour Party needs to tell the government to be on the side of business. Newcastle is going to be a very passionate and independent sector. I hope the these people can continue to run businesses that they obviously care about. With only a few exceptions, the industry has been listening to public health recommendations and adapted their businesses to these. And this has been pretty evident walking around the city. Government support so far has not been matching the needs of the industry. Specifically, venues have had to restrict their capacity because of floor space and are suffering because of this reduced capacity. I'm glad the council has been able to take some steps like expanding pavement cafes to try and support them through this. But the industry clearly needs measures that address their increased operating costs while their capacity is down and their opening hours are reduced. And these specific measures are what the industry has asked for and addresses those points, not just about delivering cheap beer. This disease has taken a lot from us and is extremely isolating and disconnecting. And concerted action from this government is needed to ensure these places will still be around to provide the good times that we used to be a reliable feature of the Toon. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Our Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has asked for collective forbearance. Our Prime Minister correctly identifies that we need to act collectively as one to combat the pandemic. COVID-19 is highly infectious and has the ability to infect the whole population. This is a systemic risk. Our entire population, or if a large part of it were actively infected at the same time, this could lead to a cascading complex systems failure, healthcare, logistics, supply chains, food distribution, and security. To ensure this does not happen, we have adopted measures to flatten the curve of the virus's spread through our population. These are central government policies, and we support them for this reason. But they have consequences. Some sectors of the economy, such as hospitality, in this environment of these restrictions, are no longer viable and will continue to be so until these policies are eased. The people who work in these businesses have been made unemployed due to government policy decisions. The original furlough scheme was a fair in sustaining livelihoods in this new environment. The new scheme that has been announced will not. As Councillor Bell has made clear, it is a recipe for mass unemployment. The libertarian argument is that these jobs no longer exist and that these people should be made redundant and moved to other jobs. These other jobs do not exist. From May to August, I worked as a physician on a COVID-19 ward. There, I and my team were given the support we required to deal with the viral pandemic. I've never written so many death certificates, and I have never had so many difficult phone calls that would normally have been done in person. With our collective effort, we made it through this first wave. In 1918 Spanish flu outbreak, 80% of all deaths were in the second wave. Approximately 70 billion is the cost so far of the furlough scheme. 100 billion is the amount and quantitative easing that has been announced so far. Where does quantitative easing go? To the bond markets and secondarily to asset prices. Who has the assets? In the UK, it's primarily the top 1%. Do you notice the inequality in these two figures? Oodles of money for the asset holders, but for the furloughed workers who are about to be made unemployed through direct policy decisions, no more money. Get on your bike to nowhere. Newcastle Airport is in my ward, and a large number of the workers who are threatened by the ending of the furlough. If we are to collectively forbear and collectively change our behaviours to slow the spread of the virus, we must all feel part of the same collective effort. There cannot be one rule for the elite and another one for everyone else. The substantive motion tonight is the furlough motion. This is small beer for an isolated subsector of our economy. Thank you, Lord.
Lord Mayor, you're muted.
Sorry, Councillor Shatwell, are you with us?
Yeah, I just couldn't hear you because you were muted. Sorry, thank you, Lord Mayor. For the past 2 weeks since the Chancellor launched his winter economy plan, I've been plagued by one word: unviable. Whilst it doesn't quite pack the punch of being the enemy within, it's had a similar effect to undermine and potentially destroy an entire industry and all of the workers in it. It's made people like myself who work in the creative industries or hospitality sector feel utterly worthless and betrayed, and not just as an industry, but also as failed individuals who now need to get retrained to get better jobs. The Chancellor's new job support scheme will only support those people in viable jobs, despite the furlough scheme supporting many unviable ones, and it favours full-time employees rather than 2 people working part-time, further increasing unemployment. The winter economy plan was perfectly timed to coincide with the pandemic's second wave. Just as he launched a scheme based on viability, restrictions came in to make it impossible for pubs, restaurants and music venues to trade. It's an absolute disgrace that this government's own failings, and I will continue to criticise the Tory government, that its own failings of its unviable privatised test and trace system created the very conditions for the 10 p.m. curfew to become inevitable. This could have been predicted and support put in place in advance. Labour called for a targeted furlough scheme to focus on those businesses most affected by COVID, recognising that jobs might still be viable when social distancing measures are relaxed. When asked about the impact of his winter economy plan on the creative industries and hospitality, the Chancellor pointed to the government's £1.57 billion cultural recovery programme and the self-employment support scheme, neither of which offer support to the commercial hospitality sector or the freelancers working in it. This might in part answer Councillor Cott's points about why we need to focus on hospitality now. The hospitality sector has been abandoned by this government. Some feel that it's part of a long-term Tory attack on the alternative nighttime economy, on DIY counterculture, on youth culture, or the power that comes from social cultural gatherings. This sector is rendered unviable for no other reason than the government's willingness to sit back and watch it decline, and out of a belief that we must be led by and allow the labour market to adjust to COVID. In the meantime, we're encouraged to retrain, despite working creatively and profitably for decades, and be reallocated into other sectors, or as the Chancellor says, to adapt and adjust to the new reality, a new reality where every sector has fewer job openings than before COVID. It's undeniably difficult to determine precisely which jobs will be viable after the crisis ends, while we're still in the middle of it, since economic activity is so warped by government restrictions. But we have to believe that we'll all want to go to pubs, restaurants, nightclubs, music venues, theatres and cinemas again, especially including those venues that have historically fallen outside of Arts Council subsidies. For the city, we need targeted support now, so I think this motion is valid, and also the furlough motion. I don't think it's an either or. We need targeted support now from the government to help protect our 10,000 plus hospitality jobs, not least because those working in the sector still believe that they are viable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Not sure if my video is working or not. I got an error message earlier, so my apologies if I'm not coming through on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. First, just let me say that we're fortunate to live in a city that is widely regarded as friendly, welcoming, and a good place to visit. The hospitality sector plays no small part in that, and I support the broad principle of this motion, particularly as amended, but I regret that we even need to be discussing it at all. Councillor Forbes said earlier in this meeting that he warned 2 months ago that too many venues in the hospitality sector and beyond, no doubt, were being opened without effective track and trace in place. This is undoubtedly true. Without track and trace, without a contact tracing app, without a proper continuation of furlough, even if just for targeted circumstances, greater incidence rates like those we've seen were inevitably going to create the difficulties that we're seeing. So why did the LA7 not see this coming? Initial commentary at the start of the local lockdown suggested that the halfway house the hospitality industry has been forced into was something that council leaders wanted. Now we're saying it's a problem. This is why the public are confused as to the messaging at a local level and why Councillor Cott asked for clarity earlier this evening. I've learned this evening that Wylam Brewery is shutting their tap room in Exhibition Park indefinitely. I feel particularly for the staff who stand to lose at this most challenging of times. Their figures tell us that their trade was down by over a third in the first week of September and nearly 80% in the week the 10 p.m. curfew was first announced. The decisions on local lockdown must be taken into account, and the role of the LA7 leaders in advocating for these measures have to be recognised. Why are we only now raising concerns about the hospitality sector? Were these issues only apparent in the last 48 hours, requiring an emergency motion, or were they in fact apparent several weeks ago, shortly after the local lockdown restrictions were announced? The government must shoulder the blame for the wider policy context and categorical failings that have made local lockdown restrictions as damaging as they will be. But I am concerned that local leaders must recognise their own role in calling for measures in the first place, and in Newcastle only calling for these remedial actions now this evening. It is this timing of this emergency motion that is the whiff of politics about it, unfortunately, not our amendment to it. So yes, these measures may be necessary to support viable businesses in the city, but I regret that we're only discussing it now and that the circumstances have been created to require it. Thank you.
Councillor Dunn. Councillor Dunn, are you muted?
I thought I'd unmuted it. Is that okay, Lord Mayor?
That's fine. That's fine.
Good, good. I think it's obvious to a certain extent why this is an emergency motion, because the immediacy of the situation in the hospitality sector needs to be fully recognised, and that's what this motion does. Lord Mayor, we can't crystal ball gaze about what might or might not happen. It's not a situation of, shy Ben's getting out. This is a situation where you get what you're given, to be honest. And what we're being given and what the hospitality sector is being given is frankly rubbish. Councillor Forbes talked earlier on in the oral question about the appetite for risk and about business viability. Well, the fact is they've gone crashing through the floor because of this pandemic. The success of this city, the whole of the city, all its communities, all its residents, all its businesses relies significantly on the hospitality sector. I think one of the things that the leader said that I do disagree with is that he said Newcastle wasn't unique. Well, I think it is unique, and I think what this motion does is gives us the opportunity to celebrate that uniqueness, whether it's the Granger Market, the sporting events, or the other hosting opportunities, or whether it's our wonderful, fabulous, well-respected, well-run hospitality sector. If we're going to try to prevent further job losses, Lord Mayor, it's essential to me that we adopt this motion, and I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, you reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. After the national lockdown, so many businesses in the hospitality sector...
Excuse me, Lord Mayor. I sent you a chat asking if I could be added to the speakers. Is that not possible?
Yes, I've seen it, but we restricted to 6 people speaking.
No problem, Lord Mayor. Sorry. Apologies, Councillor Forbes.
No problem, John. Lord Mayor, as I was saying, so many businesses in the hospitality sector worked so hard after the national lockdown to make sure that their premises were safe for people to visit. That's why when the original set of restrictions in early September were asked for, at the same time, let me correct some of the mistruths being spread about by irresponsible members of the opposition, we asked for business support alongside those restrictions. I have said that time and time again. Please do not misrepresent that view. You are false in doing so. But it's no doubt, Lord Mayor, that since these restrictions without financial support were introduced, licensing income has gone down, in some cases for pubs between 60 and 90%, and there's evidence of operators closing and having to juggle the difficult issues of perishable food, staff rotas, rent, insurance, taxes, all of the issues that people need confidence around in running a business. There's no doubt we need a national scheme of support for the broader hospitality sector. We also need, from our combined authority, a local package of support, as Liverpool have announced, and we're working on something like that. We've done a lot in the city centre to create physical space outdoors so that people can operate their premises in a safe way. Just look at the transformational changes of Blackett Street, Grey Street and Northumberland Street. But we also need a sense of how we're going to get through this crisis, which is why I've been spending my time over the last few weeks working with partners, working with businesses, working with people across this city and beyond to try to make sure that we change the failings of the national support arrangements around test and trace from this government and lobby hard for the financial support that we need. Now, I've been doing that this week. Councillor Stone's clearly spent his week trying to think of petty insults to work into a speech about me this evening. I'm afraid, Lord Mayor, as we've seen so many times before, he's clearly obsessed with his petty jealousies. Perhaps he can't get over the vision of me in the shower. But what we need, Lord Mayor, is a clear different approach from the government. We need that financial support. We need that tapered package of support for the business sector. And we need fundamental review of the tax regime which underpins this. Because what's been very clear throughout this COVID crisis is that the tax regime of business rates is no longer fit for purpose. It's already out of date in the retail sector, and the business regime hasn't taken into account changes there. There's no doubt we need major transformational change of the business rates regime across the whole of our hospitality industry. And let's not forget that this isn't just about pubs and bars and restaurants. It's also about the hotels who host the people who come into our city for major events. It's about the big events that were held at Gosforth Racecourse, very successfully organised, very innovative, very creative, and done in a way that were extremely safe. Lord Mayor, we need to ensure that the viability of this sector is protected through this extraordinary period of time where people's social contacts are restricted. There will be a time when our hospitality sector is back on its feet. There will be a time when it produces enough turnover in order to survive by itself. But until that time, we need to do what we can to protect it, to get it through this next few difficult months, make sure that we don't see the 10,000 job losses that are at serious risk in that sector and beyond, and that the hospitality sector once again can be part of creating a great North City where everybody has the opportunity to enjoy what our city has to offer, whatever their interest. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I call on Councillor Kemp to reply to the debate.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I thank all members for the contributions. I welcome some of them and frankly am astounded by others. Councillor Cott, your stream of consciousness, which appeared to focus on two elements, political posturing, which I think I saw from the whole of the opposition today, apart from, I would state, with the exception of Councillor King, and it's clearly very pertinent and personal, the experiences he relayed to us today, and no one would wish to take that away. Where I think that there's a misapprehension, a confusion of perhaps just political game playing. It is the idea around the inclusion of particular aspects of the movement of will from the business industry, specifically around VAT and cutting beer duty, something that is specifically asked from the industry across the piece. This is not about encouraging partying behaviour. This is about making one element of making those businesses viable. I think it's shameful that opposition members choose to use this platform to play games rather than actually recognise the industries, those people, those 10,000 plus individuals who are facing a very bleak autumn, not sure of their future. This is a moment in time where we should stand together as a city, signal our support to government, engaging with government, as Councillor Stone says, about protecting these immediate jobs. No one is for 1 second claiming the moral high ground that there isn't support required across other vulnerable sectors. I myself am a trustee of a national arts and cultural venue, so I am too aware of the challenges that are faced, but there are specific interventions through Arts Council and other funding streams that are directed, even if the funding isn't forthcoming yet. I think there is no doubt that we, as the administration, will be supporting all measures to support all people who are facing vulnerable times in the future. This motion today is very specific. It's about identifying a particular sector most vulnerable, most needing to hear a clarion of support from this council, true leadership, and I urge the council to reject the amendment and support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Does council agree the amendment? We're going to ask for our devices to be used for this again.
No.
No, not at all.
No.
Agreed.
I think we're going to have to use our devices for this. So if you'd like to plug into GoVote. It's up there now. Is the amendment agreed?
No.
IT, I can't see the screen. Thank you. So it's clear the amendment is not agreed.
Sorry.
Can I therefore ask if the original motion is agreed? If you go back to your GoVote device. So there now.
Lord Mayor.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble. I can't get the GoVote to work, but
Councillor Schofield.
Yes, I can't get it to work, but I agree with this original motion. So if somebody
So you
could put that
voted
on.
against the amendment, and we'll record that. And now you're voting.
I haven't done anything. I'm 87.
Right.
You're not, Anne.
Seat 87.
Don't look a day over 86.
Right, we'll record. I'll ask our staff to record that as a vote against the amendment, and we're now voting for the motion.
Which I'm voting for.
Which Councillor Schofield is voting for, and it's clear that that is carried. So if we can now move on to back to item 10, which is the motion on apprenticeships and skills training. I'll call on Councillor Cott to move this motion to be seconded by Councillor Ashby. Councillor Cott.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, this is a very timely motion. We're facing a grave crisis, a crisis of our young generation. We think of 18 to 24-year-olds in particular, we can see that almost 17%, even before this crisis, were actually not in education, training, or employment. There's a crisis of skills, with a third of all employers reporting shortages or gaps. 9% of all the working population in the North East have no qualifications at all. The North East has the lowest proportions of advanced and higher apprenticeships of any English region. Unemployment is edging up, and we expect it to get much, much worse, especially with the impact of the end of the government's furlough scheme, as we have partly discussed already this evening. Unemployment is predicted to affect, in particular, the unskilled and the young in particular measure. And again, the North East region will be the worst affected. We await more bad news over the coming months, with a quarter of all small businesses expecting to be out of business. Hopefully that won't be the case, but that is what they are saying. 85% of enterprises in Newcastle employ less than 10 people, and we could lose a huge number of small businesses and potentially the connected supply chains that serve them. 79% of businesses have used the job retention scheme, but of course that's disappearing. And the scarring impact of unemployment could be very severe. Lord Mayor, skills are a driver for reducing inequalities, but the government hasn't yet been clear about how it will deal with its commitment to extend apprenticeships for all. We're waiting to hear in this area what the levelling up agenda really means. Is it just rhetoric, or is it something meaningful? There's so much bluster from central government in relation to these issues, it's very hard to see what is the reality and what is a misbelief. The problem is compounded by uncertainty over Brexit. What's going to happen with the Brexit deal? Who knows? And of course, it's also compounded by the problem of low levels of job-related training, particularly in the North East. Now, what we need to do is we need to unlock the potential noted by the LEP in pharmaceutical industries, automotive industries, and in food production. And we need to develop digital and green industries. Now, I hear a lot in many discussions in various different meetings about digital industries and green industries, in particular in the way the council is doing its business, and indeed in connection with what discussions are taking place with North of Tyne. North of Tyne needs an effective skills strategy which takes into account all the risks. But I understand that this particular agenda is waning a little bit at the moment, partly because of the politics within North of Tyne, with problems with particular portfolio holders, and also that disconnect, I think, between the North of Tyne Mayor and some of the leaders of the North East authorities. So we need to think about that very carefully. We need to think more about developing the role of the Skills Hub. We've recently, all as members, received information about some new roles which the Skills Hub will play. And I believe there is £250,000 coming from North of Tyne to supplement that role. But quite clearly, that Skills Hub needs to be much bigger. It needs to extend its reach, and it needs to have buy-in from a lot of partners. And I'm hoping that will develop, and maybe there'll be some reassurance tonight. But we see the Skills Hub mentioned all the time in council documentation, but so far I cannot see how that will make a difference. There are various things that we as politicians should be thinking about, and we should be lobbying our own parties for policies which can be implemented in the future should we be successful electorally. The Liberal Democrats, for example, are looking at a skills and training levy. And that levy would go into a social mobility fund. Of course, there is a big link, as I'm saying, between social mobility, between inequality and paucity of skill. We're also looking at a skills wallet where everyone would have the opportunity of £10,000 in their bank account, as it were, to pay for training throughout their lives.
30 seconds, Councillor Cott.
So, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So just to sum up, it's really important that we start to take action to address these issues. And I see in the amendment, of course, there are a number of actions which are being worked upon. But I think it's really important that we take issue with these points in this meeting now and put on record our concerns about these grave issues which could really blight a whole generation of young people and indeed the lives of older people moving forward. So thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Ashby, I believe.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and apologies for the light behind my head. I've had to move because I'm running out of battery. Unemployment is already soaring even before the furloughing scheme unwinds. It's forecast that the rate will double or treble over the rest of the year, which means several million of our people will be without jobs for heaven knows how long. And it's very evident from what the chief economist at the Bank of England, the business minister and business leaders have been saying on CBI webinars that the burden will fall disproportionately on the young, the unskilled and the regions. The head of the CBI, when talking about the aspiration to build back better, highlights the need for green growth, infrastructure, investment and critically skills. The region has aspirations to excel in green industries, pharmaceuticals, advanced manufacturing, but it's not the only one. The competition will be fierce from other regions and nations, like the West Midlands, as I mentioned earlier. So a skills pool, and equally importantly, a new culture of reskilling will be vital. We have existing assets. Our universities attract students and researchers from all over the world, but so many of them leave because they can't get permanent jobs here. And we've had a steady trickle of talented people go away over the years. Even Alan Shearer left to pursue his career elsewhere. And our spin-outs from universities don't yet match other top universities. We have a FTSE 100 IT company in Sage, but for 40 years or more, we rarely had more than 30 publicly quoted companies. We have Nissan and a supply chain of nearly 30,000. We have some specialist engineering companies. But as the statistics in the motion show, we were short of skills before the lockdown for them to build upon, and we don't have the right ones going forward. Those who are made redundant may not be re-employed in their current sectors. When I helped create new jobs at Concert 40 years ago, we recognised with heavy hearts that we could create jobs for the wives and children of steelworkers, but a blast minder, the most talented of jobs, wasn't going to find work in a crisp factory. So we're to create our own new industrially advanced green region, let's call it Geordie Glen. We need leadership, an entrepreneurial approach, but most importantly, we need substantial investment of money and effort from all parties, and quickly too, in local people and their underlying competencies, which will mean we're building assets for life. Lord Mayor, I second the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashby. Now, the guillotine has just fallen, but there is an amendment put down which I will allow to be moved. Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell, are you muted?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I am, and I've taken notice of the fact that a guillotine has fallen. So I'm not going to repeat what I said within my portfolio presentation, because that is closely linked with why we're having to put this amendment forward tonight. So opportunities for our residents have to be high on the agenda. We all agree on that. This includes job opportunities and pathways into employment with apprenticeships and skills and training. What we can't afford, Lord Mayor, and a number of councillors have said this from both sides of the chamber tonight, is that we can't afford any more mixed messages, because one thing we are getting is more mixed messages from central government, and we can't afford to mix the messages up here locally. So what I believe the amendment achieves is clarity. I think it lays out our asks and whom to ask. Without a doubt, the job opportunity prospects and requirements are changing at an alarming pace. We above all need reliable baseline statistics and the ability to act quickly with the appropriate resources from the appropriate department or partner. We need to be agile and effective to give people the best possible opportunity in what will be the most difficult times we've ever seen. Lord Mayor, that's it, and I'll move the amendment accordingly.
You need to unmute, Lord Mayor.
Sorry about that, people. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'm really pleased to support this amendment, and I do hope that Councillor Cott accepts this as a friendly amendment. Can I say, Lord Mayor, that Councillor Cott is talking rubbish about the way the North of Tyne is working, and he ought to look at all of the decisions and the investment that is being made there, and to criticise us in that way is atrocious. Lord Mayor, my other comment to Councillor Cott would be we ought to limit the length of motions. They don't need to be briefing papers. If we need briefing papers, we could ask for them separately. What we're trying to do through this friendly amendment, Lord Mayor, is acknowledge what is in place and ensuring that anything that comes to City Council is up to date. Lord Mayor, as colleagues have said tonight a number of times, we're really concerned about the impact on young people. We've all seen the shambolic exam situation for our young people in the city, indeed across the country. And we also heard today at City Futures Board, Lord Mayor, that the businesses in our city are suffering catastrophically, as colleagues have said tonight. And much of that challenge is as a direct result of this pandemic. Businesses were viable prior to this pandemic. Businesses could be viable in the future if they were supported appropriately. So, Lord Mayor, as a local authority, as Councillor Bell has set out, and in my role in North of Tyne leading on employability and inclusion, we've been collaborating with partners for months to make sure that we are doing all we can with the funding that's available to us, of course, to make sure that we're helping in the right way. So, Lord Mayor, I'd just like to set out a few of those. For example, having the adult education budget devolved to us means that we could set out a clear skills plan for what we wanted that funding to cover. We've done all of this in partnership. It's set out in the public domain, and we've been very open and honest about what's available to us to make sure that we're doing the right things. We've already invested in support for care leavers, for those who are returning to work after a caring responsibility, for those people who are investigating how we can fund those people who are in a domestic abuse situation. We've worked together with local authorities across the North of Tyne and with Job Centre Plus to make sure that we can collaboratively and collectively deliver on Kickstart. And we're also working collectively in partnership to support the work with DWP on youth hubs. The motion refers to the skills plan, Lord Mayor. That skills plan is being developed collaboratively across the LEP, local authorities and with North of Tyne. It will be updated and published in December of this year. There's been massive engagement so far, and the wider engagement will inform the plan over the next couple of months. And it will build on the skills plan that I've mentioned that we've pulled together for the adult education budget. One of our urgent asks, along with all of the combined authorities in the country, Lord Mayor, is that we want the devolution of the apprenticeship levy so that we can collectively use that to make sure that those apprenticeships can be offered in the right places with the businesses who are willing to work with us. And Lord Mayor, in my role on the Inclusive Economy Board for North of Tyne, we're working with a range of partners to make sure that we can deliver that. We're thinking about what we offer in terms of retraining, as well as first opportunities for training, and we're thinking about ongoing skills development for those who are currently in work but can't seek promotion. Quite a lot of this is set out in the Good Jobs agenda, and collectively and collaboratively, Lord Mayor, with partners, we're doing our very best to set out what we can offer. I think tonight we're asking for tailored support package, as we've done in a couple of motions that have been here today, and we want the proper powers devolved to the combined authority and to the local authority, so we can make the right decisions in the right place that respond to the needs that we need to address in our city and support those who are really struggling. Lord Mayor, I second the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor wishes to speak to request suspension of standing orders. Councillor Taylor.
Lord Mayor, I think this is an important debate, and we also have two more important motions on the agenda, so I'd like to suggest that we suspend standing orders to allow these motions to be debated.
Is that seconded?
Yes, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. The best will in the world, we're going to have to use our devices again rather than shout out. So can we ask for another go vote, please?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, is that not out of order because we're out of time now?
Exactly.
And the scene has already fallen.
No, I missed it going through, and the motion was being put at the time that 8:30 fell.
Actually, it was after 8:30, Lord Mayor, when they put it in. It was 20:33, so it was 3
yes,
minutes.
I can see that, but she would have had to have interrupted the mover of the motion to put it.
So I was waiting for you to announce that the guillotine was closed, and then you called another speaker, and I didn't want to interrupt. Sorry, if maybe I should have been more impolite, but if it's a couple of minutes late, I really still think that that's an important thing that we should be voting on. Do you really want to say that you want to stop us voting because of a slight procedural problem? I mean, that's just silly.
No, I think we should vote and ask whether it may well have been my own failure to call the suspension at exactly at 8:30. Right, can we have this vote on the suspension of standing orders, please? So it isn't agreed to suspend standing orders. The guillotine has fallen. So the motion has been put and amended. So I'll just ask Councillor Cott to reply to what's been said.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't get to hear the rest of Councillor McCarthy's words, because it's quite interesting to get an update. Of course, we do look forward to the skills plan, and we hope that it will be clear, and we look forward to seeing how it has been developed alongside the perspectives of partners. So that is good to note. I did think I would support the amendment, by the way, but I did think it was a little self-congratulatory. I do think we are moving into a time where things are going to be very, very tough, and I know you'll say you're taking that into consideration. And I do think the government has a lot of scope to help us here. And I do hope that they do provide the support to North of Tyne that's needed, and that Newcastle gets its share. The point I was making about the leadership is we do find that the politics of North of Tyne compared to the councils is sometimes unhelpful to setting a clear direction, and we hope that that won't be the case moving forward, because it's really important that we get this agenda right. So I'm certainly happy to support the amendment. I do see it as a friendly amendment, and certainly you will have the support of the opposition in relation to the broad thrust of what you want to achieve. But of course, we will scrutinise it, and if we don't think it's delivering for residents, then we will let you know.
Thank you. So Councillor Cott has accepted the amendment. So is the amended motion agreed?
Agreed.
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 Do we need to go to
Agreed.
no vote? If anybody thinks we need to go to go vote, please put it in the chat.
No.
Now.
No.
Nobody's doing so, so the amended motion is agreed. The motion on trees has been withdrawn. We now have to decide on the remaining items of business, whether we're going to take them this evening or defer them. So can I ask Councillor King if he wishes to defer this motion to another time? That's the motion on furlough extension, or to vote on it now without debate. Councillor King?
Vote on it now, please, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Right. There is an amendment. So can we please vote first on the amendment to the motion? Is the amendment agreed?
Agreed.
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 I'm not hearing any dissent. If there is any, raise your hands. Raise your hand for dissent. No, so the amendment is agreed. Is the motion on furlough extension agreed? Sorry, the amended motion.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
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 Thank you for that, colleagues.
Agreed.
Thank you. And there is the final motion on lifting the ban. Councillor Kilgour, do you want to defer this or take it to a vote now without debate?
Could we hear it tonight, Lord Mayor? Can I just ask for the sake of...
Can't hear it tonight. We can vote it now or defer it till next time.
No, take it tonight, please. But just for the sake of accuracy, can I ask that the second bullet point, the weekly amount that an asylum seeker receives has recently changed to £39.60. So if I could just ask for that amendment as a point of clarification. And also, can I thank Councillor Ashby for his amendment, which I'm very happy to take as a friendly amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, sorry.
Yes.
Obviously, I agree with Councillor Kilgour. I do think it's a great shame that this has gone without a discussion. These are marginalised people, and now we're actually not having a discussion about it. I accept it, but I just wanted to register my disappointment.
Yes,
Thank
well,
you.
we are. I'm trying to keep to our standing orders as fairly as possible, and that is what we have to do. So I believe Councillor Kilgour has accepted the amendment. Yes, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
So is the amended motion agreed?
Agreed.
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 No dissent?
Agreed.
No dissent, so the amended motion is agreed. So that is the close of business. The next meeting will be on Wednesday, the 4th of November. So in the meantime, please look after yourselves and promote where you can the messages of hands, face and space, and keep safe. Thank you, colleagues. That concludes the meeting.